mindset that is more humanistic, more centralized on heart set and mindset and connection rather than ego and me. More about we than me.
Niko, Psaltopoulos, thank you so much for joining me all the way from Australia. How are you doing?
Hey, Michael, really good. It's really good to see you. Really good to see you.
Really good to see you too. How have you been during this COVID? And you're originally from Greece, now you're in Australia. What's happening with you?
It's a bit mixed up, I know, but we can get there. So I started off from here, actually. I'm Melbourne born and raised, and I moved across to Greece about 3 or 4 years ago now to do some work there with MarineTraffic. And I came here back to Australia in late Feb, but I've been locked in with the lockdown ever since. So I'm not going anywhere in a hurry. And look, I'm happy to be back here. It's a great country, as you'd appreciate. And I just work remotely, so we're making it work.
I love it. I love it. Okay, great. So you know, over these next 20 minutes, I'm really excited to talk about a variety of things that we've already started discussing before we started sharing this episode about this idea of dealing through adversity, leading through crisis, and particularly, you know, also what you're doing with MarineTraffic. So Niko, I'd love for you to tell me a little bit about where you started, where your journey took you, and then we'll transition off to the entrepreneurial stuff.
Okay, so I started off in the media, and I worked in the media for about 5 years, and it was an amazing experience because I got to cover lots of stories and really interact with people from all walks of life. But it was at a time when, believe it or not, the internet was just starting to have on media. It was in the late 90s, and you could see the landscape changing very, very quickly. So I wanted to do something different, and one thing I learned very early on is our ability to be relevant depends on our ability to disrupt ourselves. So the more often we can disrupt our own trajectory, that ensures greater relevance in the world and the space that we find ourselves in. Right. So when I wrapped up with media, I fell into pharmaceuticals, and I spent 15 years in the world of pharma working for an American multinational company based in Chicago. And they were absolutely brilliant. So I worked in leadership in pharma, really understanding how to build a business, how to engage with customers, strategy, marketing, all the great things that you get to learn from a multinational group like a huge pharma company. In the last 5 years of my time in pharma, what I could see though was big corporate business and the way that it was structured versus this ecosystem that was emerging around the world, this ecosystem that was very innovative and disruptive and had a really good energy about it, and almost like an attitude of anything is possible, just watch us and we'll make it happen. And I was really, really attracted to that because what I found was working for a big company, as good as it was in the initial stages, that it was slow to move and we weren't actually responding, but we were reacting to change. Right. And that was a real problem, as we know now. So what I did within the last 5 years, I discovered co-working when I was in New York. I went into one of the original WeWork spaces in downtown New York. There's a story there. And I thought, great, I could do this in Australia. So I launched a couple of co-working spaces in Australia.
Whoa.
Here in Melbourne. Yeah, they were very intimate. So it was designed to be quite collaborative. But what it did, as we managed these spaces and these spaces grew, it exposed me to this almost like, it was almost like Alice falling into this black hole of wonderland of all these startups and tech and bloggers and vloggers and you name it, people earning income and making a living in a very different way to what I had been trained or accustomed to doing. And, you know, Michael, it really excited me and it enthused me. So I did that for the last 5 years, and obviously that got me into all these startup events. I became an ambassador for Startup Grind. And I continued throwing myself into the startup community, understanding how it worked and the opportunity that existed in the world that was changing super, super fast. And all I knew was that I didn't want to miss out. I wanted to be part of the change. I wanted to be part of the world. I didn't want to be relevant. And not being irrelevant meant constantly getting out of my comfort zone to learn new things and challenge myself and feel uncomfortable more so often than not.
Wow, that's okay. So you're starting off all the way in media. You're finding yourself in pharmaceuticals in a big company. You're realizing that there's all these great changes, and a big company might be slow to move, and you're transitioning all of a sudden to co-working spaces and starting co-working spaces in Australia, and you're getting exposed to all these startups. So far, correct?
So far, spot on.
startup grind, and now you're realizing, okay, your passion lies in seeing these changes unfold, dealing through these adversities and discovering new realms. How do you find yourself then in marine technology and marine traffic?
Yeah, it's crazy. It's been an amazing ride. So I did a brief stint with a health tech startup here in Melbourne. And whilst I was doing that, I was given a chance to do head of sales innovation role for a fashion brand, which I'd never done before. And it was an amazing experience. But when I left that, I started my own consultancy. I really wanted to do something for myself. And whilst traveling, being lucky enough to travel around the world, remember these things called aeroplanes that we can't get into anymore? I used to basically live in one. I got to meet the CEO of MarineTraffic, who, to be honest, at the time I didn't know a lot about the company. I've got a really good friend of mine who works in the organization, and he did say to me, he goes, "You guys need to get together." Because I could see so many commonalities between the two of you, and we did get together, and we had an amazing conversation. And that conversation spurred some work that I did for MarineTraffic as an independent consultant. And then that resulted into the role that I'm currently doing now. And I'm just so super humbled to be able to support an ever-growing team in maritime technology. And the fact that it's a startup that emanated from Greece at a time when Greece was in financial turmoil. I think that in itself is an amazing story.
Wow. Okay. So I hear a lot about non-linear trajectories and non-linear paths to career. I don't know if I've heard as many that come close to what you're describing here. Now, talk to me a little bit about maritime technology, marine technology, and Greece during the economic crisis. I'm assuming that you're talking about looking at 2008 onwards, and what's happening with marine technology, and why are you excited about that now?
So super excited. It's an amazing space. Like when you consider that 80 to 85% of all the goods around us have been transported to us via shipping,
wow.
Then you quickly understand the level of depth that shipping has and the important role that it plays in our lives. So that was one thing, the technology itself. Then I learned about the story of MarineTraffic, and it started off as a passion project by our founder, Nikos. And he's a professor at Beijing University. And what he did was he created a global community of shipping enthusiasts. And what he did, he sent out AIS transponders around the world where people placed them in strategic positions, and then we picked up data. And that data now became the platform that is known as MarineTraffic, providing different layers of information to people from all walks of life every single day, and critical information. As we saw overnight with the explosion in Beirut in Lebanon, it was MarineTraffic data that was able to actually piece together the journey of the ship that had the components that caused the explosion. So shipping technology touches on so many different parts. It's the retrospective data that we have, but it's also the data that can improve efficiency in shipping, full stop. And that's really, really exciting.
So is that really, are the use cases mainly focused on efficiency and optimization, or more about security and knowledge? Where does the sort of big value lie in having this data?
All of the above, because it's different strokes for different folks, and different companies, different businesses have very different needs. So we've got to understand that when it comes to shipping, it's an industry that for many, many years was actually untouched by technology. So the progress that we had seen in other spaces didn't exist in this space. So all of a sudden you've had this massive investment in shipping technology that has really changed the way shipping is and will be forever. And that's really exciting to be able to be part of that.
Now, when you're saying shipping technology, I'm assuming it's not necessarily that the ships are changing, but it's about how do we monitor these ships? How do we optimize the space that we store on these ships? And how do we decide which ship takes where and what journey they do, right?
Michael, it's a bit of both as well, because not only do we have shipping intelligence that actually gives us different layers of data as to how shipping operates around the world, but we're also at a day and age now where we're looking at autonomous shipping, shipping without anyone, just basically carrying cargo around the world. So exciting times that we're
Wait,
living
wait.
through.
Are there literally ships with autonomous ships that have nobody on them right now?
Yeah, so in testing, yeah, absolutely,
Wow.
absolutely.
Very, very cool. It just dawned on me that this term shipping, we use it interchangeably now with any good that is being transferred from one place to another, or we want to ship a product, but I guess it stems from the fact that everything is done by ships, right? You're saying 80 or 85% of the things are actually done by ships, so it's now making a lot of sense. So it sounds like we are in this exciting time where maritime technology is becoming more and more relevant, and more startups are going into it. It sounds to me pretty obvious that if 80 or 85% of goods are transferred through ships, this should have been one of the first industries to be able to utilize big data, but it sounds like that wasn't necessarily the case. There weren't many entrepreneurs going into that field in the first place.
And that's a really good point. I think maybe there was an eagerness for entrepreneurs to break in, but like any industry, when an industry is set in its ways, it's really hard, and it's working for the people and the key players within that industry. It's really hard to really drive the change, but at some point, something starts to break. And when it starts to break and it's not working as efficiently as it once did, that's the catalyst for change. So it's probably almost like a perfect storm, Michael. As we know, it was a product market fit where something wasn't working and it became apparent, then all of a sudden the need for technology, in this case, became more real and more relevant.
Wow. Okay, so now talk to me a little bit about dealing with adversity and dealing with difficulties, especially through COVID. We mentioned this before, but I'd love to hear a little bit about your take and your leadership journey there.
Look, it's been an amazing journey for everyone over the last few months, and who knows what happens next. And up until now, though, as an organization, as a team, I've got to say, like, I'm really proud of the way that we and our team have managed through this over the last few months. It's been incredible. One thing that we did was, it was quite prophetic actually. In January, every January, we have our kickoff summits. So we fly in our team from all over the world into the heart of Athens, and we have a kickstart to the year. Strategy, marketing, and time for us to bond and get together.
Wow.
During the last day of this team meeting that we run, we had a pandemic. We had H1N1 breakout. So about 10 of our team members got sick during this process. Wow. So what we then did was, in January now, we had to lock down our offices to avert, obviously, the spread. Now, that was basically a practice run for what was to come only like a month and a half later. So and because we were following the situation from Wuhan and we're keeping a very close eye on the situation, when we could see things at the tipping point, just before they tipped over, we called it. So we actually shut our offices down very, very quickly. We communicated with our team very openly, and we sent everyone home as a dispersed team to work from wherever they live, anywhere in the world. And I think taking action early on and being on top of it was really, really important, particularly because it's such an unknown, scary situation. The next thing we did, Michael, was we called fortnightly meetings, which we still do. They're global team check-ins, and it's a chance to just get together. And at times there may not be anything new to say, but the fact that we're together and we see each other on screen, and we have a bit of a laugh, a bit of banter, is really, really important, because they're the water cooler conversations that we can no longer physically have together. And it's not until connect with the team the way you do remotely that you really understand and feel how much the people that you work with really mean to you, and what massive role they play in each of our lives. So having our meetings fortnightly with the global team was really, really important. Very quickly as well, we also formed a crisis management team, and the crisis management team, which I'm part of as well, was all about assessing the situation on a weekly basis. What are the hotspots? What are we doing? What are scenarios that we should be exploring? In terms of scenario planning, it was really, really important that we kept it very simple, because this can play out in so many different ways. It gets super confusing. So we only ever focused on 1, 2, or 3 scenarios max, and we were usually pretty much in the right area. But fundamentally, apart from all the logistical stuff, the most important thing that we were doing was maintaining human connection,
Right.
maintaining connection through dialogue, through conversations, Slack, through phone calls that we have with our team, or through Google Hangouts discussions, and they were one-on-ones. And maintaining that, even to this day and beyond, it's something we'll continue to do, is really, really important, because people work with people, people connect with people, and we as humans give each other greater purpose and focus. Right. So ensuring that people are feeling safe and secure, tick, tick, huge priorities for us. But maintaining this, being able to look at people and see how they're feeling and ask them questions behind the questions and all of that was super important, has been our saving grace. It hasn't been easy. It hasn't been easy because even leaders have their moments as well. And I read somewhere recently that the role of a leader in a crisis is to absorb fear and exude hope. And I really, really believe that. At times, though, even a leader can be a little bit shaken. And I think it's really important for everyone to hear that and understand that, because at times, and I'm guilty of it too, we may put unrealistic expectations on our leaders and what our leaders should be doing next and what they should know and what we expect of them.
Right.
And if this situation teaches us anything, it should teach us a shift in mindset, a mindset that is more humanistic, more centralized on heart set and mindset and connection, rather than ego and me. More about we than me.
I love it. That's just incredible. By the way, how did the team react when already, a month before the rest of the world, you're shutting down? Essentially, you're doing something that even in March, I remember that when I left Stanford campus in mid-March, and we said, okay, yeah, we're coming back in a week or two after spring break. And then they said, no, you're not. We were like, wow, this is crazy. We can't even believe it. I can only imagine the reaction that, people might have had, back in February or January, when you're making these decisions, when the world is still not talking about COVID-19, right?
Well, and maybe I misled you. So what we did was we shut down in January on the back of our own pandemic of H1N1 infection within our company. So we shut down for about a week and a half, but then we reopened. So when we monitored the situation and we could see things moving very, very quickly, we were able to quickly shut down again for the second time. This time because of COVID, not because of H1N1.
Okay, so you had that experience and you had that, and you were able then to adapt quickly, and the team members already knew the protocol, so it was a little bit less of a shock factor than perhaps for others. Moving forward, I mean, what do you see happening both with your organization, but overall in the world of technology and tech? As you're experiencing it, obviously you're in the forefront as a leader, leading a team through this crisis. You obviously have to prepare now for years to come, both in terms of work from home, but also in terms of running a company in this new mindset. So how are you even approaching this?
Look, that's a really good question, and it's a very interesting situation that we all face. And it's interesting because, Michael, like, we've been accustomed to instant gratification.
Yeah.
There's a problem, let's fix it, we're back to normal. And I know people don't want to hear the term, but we're entering the unknown. And that's the new normal. The new normal is to totally expect the unexpected. And I think about generations before us who've gone through real hardship, through wars, through famine, through difficult, life-changing events. And what those events taught them at the time was resilience and the power to be able to have a centered perspective and move on step by step. Our generation, right here, right now, we want instant gratification. We want, okay, COVID, right, let's get over it. Let's move on. Let's get back to how we were. Firstly, I think that's a waste of a crisis, a total waste of a crisis. If we're yearning to go back to what we were, I could think of nothing worse. Like, we've learned something, we've gained something. So let's redesign it. Let's rethink it. Let's move on to something that could be better than what it was. But it's human nature to feel safe and secure, to gravitate to what makes us feel safe and secure. And that is the past. But in this case, we need to let it go, because as you said, and I totally agree with you, what we're experiencing is not going to last for a few months. It will last for a number of years, if we're lucky. if we're lucky. So what do I think will happen? When you consider the mumps, I know, funny thing that, mumps, it took them 4 years to develop the vaccine for it to go to market. And that was with the whole world working together to actually develop a vaccine. Now, that was in the 60s. Admittedly, we've moved on in leaps and bounds in terms of tech and science and pharma since then. I get it. But we still need to go through 4 phases of trials, which includes human testing at the end of it before we even have a vaccine. So let's not wait for that silver bullet to come. Right. Instead, let's redesign our own pathway. So companies like Google and Uber, as we know, have already announced a work remote plan at least until June, July 2021. Right. So firstly, I think it's really important to be able to give your team, a company, a bit of a timeline, a bit of an understanding that, hey, this isn't going to be quickly fixed, that we're going to need time. And in that time, all we can ask is a constant flow of open and honest, transparent communication. People feel unsafe. People lose their balance when the communication stops. And even if there's nothing new to say, like I said earlier, if there's nothing new to say, maintaining that communication is really important. So for us, we have a plan over the next few months, and what we're doing, we're monitoring the situation that I mentioned earlier. And in September, we're getting together our crisis management team, and we'll assess the situation at the time to make a decision as to what we need to do between September and December. Having said that, our summit for 2021 is in January again, and it'll probably be virtual. So we're planning a virtual summit, and we're excited to be doing that. But you know what? There's opportunity in that, because we've reached out to some amazing global speakers that ordinarily we would not have access to. So there's always silver. Now, the other thing that I just want to mention is the mental health challenge that we all face during this time of quarantine and isolation, feeling the way that we're feeling. One of the things that we did very early on this year is we employed a full-time psychologist in our team. And
really?
Yeah, and she's an MT coach, and every single one of our team members has unlimited access to our MT coach whenever he or she need to have a chat, whether it's personal or professional. She's there, we're there to help together with our people operations team.
That's just remarkable. I'm so inspired by your take on it, and your the excitement that you're bringing to the table with this change, and you're saying, yes, we have this issue, we don't know what's happening. It's really problematic, but we're extremely excited about the different opportunities that it presents, and we're always looking at the upside of it. So I think that's just a remarkable way to go, and I can only imagine that everybody who works with you in this company, it can only feel the same excitement for dealing with this adversity and dealing with the challenges, and the fact that I agree that knowing the timeline and having these expectations and already planning a virtual summit for next year, I'm sure that it gives some sort of confidence to the team that's saying, well, we know some things, we don't know a lot of things, but our leadership is guiding us towards some reality that we can be confident in. And I think that's wonderful. Niko, before we leave, I have to ask you for my favorite question, 3 words that you would use to describe yourself.
Sure, done. All right. Okay. I think first and foremost, empathetic. I feel joy, I feel pain, I feel what you're feeling, and that gives me a real heightened sense of experience, and I love that because it really aids with connection. So definitely empathetic. I'm super curious. I always want to learn and throw myself into the most challenging of situations. People who know me very well go like, "You're crazy. Like, how can you do that?" But I do it. I do it because I'm curious, and I think that also leads into being adventurous. I love adventure. I love throwing myself into a plane and going to countries that I've never been to before, not knowing a single soul, and then walking away with amazing best mates that are with me for life. So I think those 3 words to describe me.
Niko, thank you very, very much. This was inspiring. I enjoyed it so much. Best of luck with everything, and I look forward to continue watching the company grow and watching your non-linear career proceed, because it's remarkable. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Michael. Thank you.
Take care.